Hey, welcome to Skeptics in the Pub Online. This is Brian Eggle here from Glasgow Skeptics. In case you're wondering who we are the trouble starters, the punkin instigators, the fear addicted, and the danger illustrated. Not really, but we did start a fire of online talks about science and skepticism way back during pandemic times, and we've been burning bright ever since. This is event number 116, and you can catch us every fourth Thursday of the month, except for October, when we've got some other evil plans. Which brings us nicely on to the subject of QED. QED, for the uninitiated, is the best science and skepticism conference in the UK, in Europe, in the world, possibly the known universe so far. And we would strongly encourage you to get yourselves along there. Not just because all of us are going to be there, but it is a fantastic conference. Tickets are available right now at qedcon.org. So please make a purchase and come and meet us there. If you really can't make it, there are streaming tickets available and you can pick them up as well from the same place. That's taking place on the 19th and 20th of October. But the day before that, we have Skepticamp. Skepticamp is a free kind of intro session to the QED conference, and it's going to be run by us at Skeptics in the Pub Online. We recently finalised our lineup of speakers for Skepticamp. We had a lot of applications and had to draw straws and tell the lucky ones and the unlucky ones whether they made it or not. And we'll start drip feeding those soon. Now, in terms of going along to QED, if you are a little bit short of money, all is not lost, because we do have a QED attendance fund, which we've had donations coming in for. But more importantly, if you are sitting watching this and you've got some extra pennies or pounds in that bank account of yours and you'd like to help somebody get along to QED, then you can donate to our QED attendance fund. So please, if you can spare anything, please go ahead and do that. You can get to that donations page by going to sitp.online, and there's a link along the top for QED fund. So please follow that now, throw in a few shekels if you can. We also usually ask for donations to help us maintain our workings during these events, but do you know what? Save your spare money for the QED attendance fund. But if you're feeling keen, you could buy some nice, sweet Sitpo merch, which you can find from our website too. Okay, let's get on to tonight's talk. So the usual format applies here, folks. We're going to have our speaker who's going to be talking for about 45 minutes. Then we'll take a break to allow you to charge your glasses, and then we come back for Q&A. If you want to ask questions at any point, again, you can get to that via our website. The link should be getting put into the text chat in Twitch as well, so look out for that. It's sitp.online/ask. If you don't have any questions, you can look at the existing ones that are there and upvote them if you want as well, so that the best ones get breezed up towards the top. Okay, so our speaker for this evening first came to my attention when she delivered this very same talk at Glasgow, and it was an awesome night. So we're very happy to have her here for the online audience. Kristen Salzer-Frost is a lecturer in fire engineering at Glasgow Caledonian University. She's got more than 2 decades worth of experience as fire safety engineer over in Australia, in the UK. She's worked in projects all around the world. Her specialities are in computer modelling of fire evacuation, practical fire safety building design strategies, international fire engineering projects, and fire safety design in historic buildings. All in all, a prodigious talent, so I hope you're as excited as I am. Please give her some love in the text chat. Kristen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Brian. So my topic today is one of my little pet rants, so hopefully you'll enjoy it too. And I want to talk about what the movies get wrong about fire. So it will definitely have 45 minutes worth of material, so I'll try and keep it a little bit brief. I'm going to try and restrict myself to 3 main areas. We're going to talk about the magic smokeless fire. We're going to talk about the very well-behaved fire they have in movies that stays where it's told to. And its friend, the magic fuelless fire, which is always fun. And then one of my pet topics, that's not how sprinklers work. So I'm going to try and illustrate with some images from movies. This one is I am going to pick on a couple of movies in particular, but they are by no means the only ones. So this is Die Hard, and you'll see there's lots and lots of fire, absolutely no smoke, and you can sort of see the sprinklers have activated everywhere, and that's not how sprinklers work. So one of the other movies I want to pick on a little bit tonight is The Towering Inferno. It's a good movie, I enjoyed it, but for a movie about fire, it did fall into most of the pitfalls that movies fall into when it comes to fire. And the first one is magic smokeless fire. So you can see here we've got a room that's very well alight, fire everywhere. But we can see all the way to the back wall here. We can see the piano, we can see the tables, you can see where you want to see because there's essentially no smoke. And that is not very realistic. This video I'm going to show you is a real fire. There's no accelerant or anything. It was done in a fire lab at NIST in America. The fire will start in the Christmas tree here and then slowly spread throughout, well, not slowly, quickly spread through the room. And just have a look, just remind yourself of this one, how much smoke there is or isn't, and keep an eye on how much smoke we have in this fire. So you can see the fire's just started in the corner here. The Christmas tree, this Christmas tree is fairly dry. They left it without watering it for about 3 weeks. So far the fire is just in the Christmas tree, and you can see we've already got quite a lot of smoke starting to build up. And unlike the other room, it hasn't even spread to other things yet. I think the couch is on fire now, and we're sort of starting to get the lamp might be on fire soon too. There it goes. But you can see we're only sort of not even 30 seconds into the fire, and already we can't see half the room because it's filled with smoke. Now, I know why they do this. This wouldn't make a very good movie. After another 30 seconds, this would just be full of smoke and you wouldn't see anything, and that's not actually very exciting to watch for a movie. So that's why we have the magic smokeless room, so we can see what's going on. But why does it bother me? This bothers me because it does lend itself to people underestimating just how much smoke you do get from a fire. And smoke is deadly for a variety of reasons. So firstly, smoke is toxic. One of the main components of smoke is carbon monoxide, CO. And the initial symptoms you will get from breathing in CO is that you will become sleepy and confused. So if you're already asleep when the fire starts, you probably won't actually wake up. The smoke will make you stay asleep. And even if you do wake up, you're going to be very confused. We see, unfortunately, people who couldn't find their way out of their own bedroom because they were just so overcome by the effects of carbon monoxide. So if you're already confused, there are other components of smoke that are irritants that, especially when they come into contact with moist surfaces, form acidic compounds. So things like hydrochloric acid and fluoric acid. And obviously the wet surfaces that it's going to come into contact are things like your lungs. So you're going to be doing a lot of coughing, and your eyes. So your eyes water a lot, which means you're busy, distracted, coughing. You can't see properly. Once again, making it much harder for you to get out. And then, of course, with all that smoke, you can't see where you're going anyway. So smoke is actually probably what kills most people in fires. Just the combination of making it harder and harder and harder for them to escape, plus the toxic components of the smoke, you can be overcome incredibly quickly. So underestimating how much smoke you get in a fire can actually be a big problem. Okay, so that takes us to problem number 2. In the movies, the fire is very well behaved. It stays exactly where it's told. This is from Towering Inferno. You can see the firefighters here having a go at fighting the fire. We come back to this scene in the movie quite a few times, and the fire just stays nicely there. Doesn't get bigger, doesn't come towards them, just stays there. Very well behaved. In real life, fire spreads very, very quickly. So here we are again, once again, the fire's staying nicely at the door. This is the Friend, the magic fuelless fire. This bit here is on fire. As it goes out, you can see it was just the wall. I'm not sure about a wall would burn. So obviously what they've done is they've decided for the composition of this image that they needed more fire. It looks better. So they sprayed the wall with some liquid fuel. But in real life, it's the fuel that burns, and that's what's causing the fire to spread and to move. So, sorry. I'm going to show you another video. This is a recreation of a fire in the Stardust nightclub in Dublin. So the fire was in the 80s, I think. And unfortunately, 48 people died. And part of what they were doing when they were investigating this fire was that they recreated a portion of the nightclub. So this is sort of a little room that was off the side. It was open to the main nightclub, but was not in use during that evening, during that event. They think the fire started down the back of this room, and they wanted to look at how big the fire would get in this space to say, was that a credible theory? Do they think that a fire that started in this part of the nightclub could have caused as much damage as they saw? Part of the other problem with that particular fire was that there were fire exits that were locked, so people were trapped, which is one of the reasons we had such high fatalities. So this video, I want to show you how fire does spread from item to item. Keep an eye on the backs of the chairs. You'll see them start to smoke, this white smoke. So that's the chairs sort of starting to break down from the heat and release flammable gases. And then the other thing to keep an eye on is this ashtray down the front here. And you'll see it start to release that white vapour as well. I've silenced the audio just because it's quite informative, but they're not talking about the same part of fire that I wanted to talk about. So you can see here the fire's spreading down. This row of chairs is starting to go. This one's starting to go. And you can see these vapours are about to catch fire, and then you can see how the fire spreads quite quickly and quite unexpectedly. At that point in the video, the person videoing the fire as part of the recreation realises that the fire has spread much more quickly and is much bigger than anybody anticipated, and he just stops recording and runs for it because he doesn't want to get caught. So that's, once again, that's a real fire. There's no accelerants there. That's just the fire spreading from chair to chair to chair, and that's how fires do spread. They go from one sort of fuel source to the next one, and of course they can sort of spread outwards as well. So we tend to think of fires as growing exponentially, which we all know what that means after the pandemic. So they can get very, very big very, very quickly. So once again, it's a problem because people really underestimate how quickly a fire can get big and how quickly it can get deadly. So this is some footage. I've just got a couple of stills here from a fire. This is CCTV in a little shop, little off license. So this is the counter where the person, shopkeeper, is standing here. There's some stock, some alcohol over in this section here. This is the door to the shop. And this is a stand which had crisp packets on it. Earlier in the video, you can see that some kids have come in and set fire to the crisp stand. We suspect that they were intending to cause a distraction maybe, so they could come in and nick things. You can see these people, they're just standing around watching the fire that's between them and their only exit, just standing there. The fire does grow pretty quickly. So this is not even a minute later, and you can see that the room's starting to fill with smoke, and actually at this stage they decide maybe they should go, and everybody does safely get out. But yes, I would very strongly recommend don't stop and watch the fire because it can get very big very quickly, and it's something that you just don't see in the movies. So we tend to have, most of our experience with fire tends to be very safe. It's well controlled. It's either cooking or maybe a bonfire when we're camping, or in the movies, obviously. We see it a lot there. And even if it's a bad fire in the movies, you tend to see that it stays in one place, it doesn't grow. Whereas in reality, the size of the fire and the location of the fire can move rapidly and cut off your escape routes. So you need to go straight away while it's small and you can safely escape, while you can see, while you're not overcome by smoke, while the fire isn't blocking your exits. So those are the first two of my pet peeves about fire in the movies. As you can see, I do think it's important because it does lead to people underestimating just how deadly fire can be. So we'll move on to my third topic, my pet peeve. That's not how sprinklers work. We've all seen it. It's in so many movies and TV shows, but mostly movies. Someone, James Bond, somebody trying to create a distraction, gets his little cigarette lighter and holds it up to the smoke detector, and suddenly all of the sprinklers in the building activate. And there's chaos and people running everywhere, and he can slip through security at the airport and steal a plane. That does happen in a Bond movie. That would not happen in real life. That's not how security works at airports. I can guarantee you if you set the fire alarm off at an airport, it will not cause security to be broken. This is an image from Die Hard. So at least in this movie, the sprinklers were activated by an actual fire, but when they activated everywhere. So you can see McLean here on the stairs, nowhere near the fire. The fire's way off to the side, and the sprinklers above him are raining water down. Water is going everywhere. That's not how sprinklers work. So how do sprinklers work? Oh, before we get to that, sorry. One of the other ones. So this is a still from the movie Hackers. I think I might be showing my age with these movies. So in the movie here, Zero Cool here has hacked the building management system to activate the sprinklers at a particular time. And so he's got his umbrella up because he knows exactly what time they're going to activate, and it catches everybody else out. That doesn't work either. The connection to the building management system of the sprinklers is the other way. The sprinklers can tell the building management system that the sprinklers have activated, and then that can allow other things to happen, like sounding the fire alarms to get everybody out, calling the fire brigade, that sort of thing. But you can't activate the sprinklers from the building management system. Not in the 80s and not now. So, real sprinklers, how do they actually work? If they don't work like they do in the movies, how do they work? So, firstly, they're activated by heat. So here we have an actual sprinkler. These are actually taken from Die Hard as well, but this is how it would actually work. So you have your sprinkler head, you have the fire underneath it, and then that causes that particular, just that one sprinkler head to activate and spray water. So here are some examples of some sprinkler heads. These all have one thing in common, which is the bit in the middle here. They've got different mechanisms, but they will all break at a particular specific temperature. So here we've got some struts being held together with usually something like solder that has a particular melting point. This is just a different shape of structure, and this is our more typical sprinkler head. I don't know if you guys look up at sprinkler heads when you're walking around the shopping centre. I do. Maybe do it sometime. Have a look. And they've got these glass bulbs in there, and the glass bulbs are very carefully designed to break when they reach a particular temperature. So this is a bit more of a typical sprinkler head arrangement, so hanging down from the ceiling. So this here is where it's connected to the pipe, so there's water just behind this plate here. Then you have the little glass bulb holding everything in place, and then here is a deflector plate, so where the water will hit it and will splash out in the required area. The little glass bulb, you have different sizes depending on the size of the sprinkler for different hazards. So the more of a hazard you have, so the more fuel you have, the faster it'll burn, the more water you want to apply, so the bigger the pipe and the bigger the bulb. And then the colour tells you what temperature it's going to activate at. So most of the ones you'll see in buildings where there are people in occupied buildings will activate at 68 degrees Celsius. So that's what the red colour means. But we have other ones as well for things like warehouses and unoccupied spaces. When this little glass bulb breaks, this plate falls away and the water can flow out. So this is a series of images showing that happening. So we've got the intact sprinkler head here. You can see in here that glass bulb has broken. The water is starting to push that little plate away and flow, and then the water flows and hits the deflector plate and is spread out across the fire below. So sprinkler heads activate one at a time based on heat, based on their heat-sensitive element. So they don't all activate at once. If the sprinkler has activated above you, you're on fire. You're not going to be standing in the stair like Don McLean. It also means that it's not using nearly as much water as it looks. So only the sprinkler heads above the fire will activate. Obviously, as we were talking about, fire can spread quite quickly. So you might have a number of heads around the fire activating, but they tend to either stop the fire from spreading and keeping it contained to a smaller area, or most of the time they will actually put the fire out altogether. Either way, it gives people in the building a lot more time to be able to evacuate before being trapped by the flaming areas or being overcome by smoke. So one of the common things that I hear when we're talking to building owners about, should they have sprinklers, they don't want to have sprinklers because they're really worried that someone will set off the smoke alarms and it will cause every sprinkler head in the building to activate and their building will be flooded. And that's what we see in the movies, but it's just not what really happens. And in fact, the amount of water that you would get from a typical sprinkler system is probably about 1/10 of the water that the fire brigade would use to put it out. So in terms of water damage, if you do have an actual fire, you probably want the sprinklers. But it does mean that because people have the understanding from the movies of how sprinklers work, they are reluctant to try and put them in buildings. So it's having real world consequences because of this reluctance from people who have these misconceptions about the sprinklers, so they don't put them in the building. So then that's one less safety system that maybe that building would have been better off if it had had that. So obviously, as part of my job, if I'm working with a design team, designing the fire safety systems for a building, if I think sprinklers are appropriate, I will try and advocate for that and try and educate the client and the rest of the design team about how sprinklers work and how they would affect a building, and what the consequences would be for not having sprinklers and what other safety systems we might have to put in instead. But this is probably the biggest one that that annoys me because it just comes up so much in so many movies. So I have been racing through this one, sorry. So this might end up being a little bit shorter than we intended. So I've talked a lot about the things that the movies got wrong about fire. So it was the smoke, it was the fire spread, and it was the sprinklers. And I've talked a bit about how it really works, and I've talked a bit about why I think those are all problems. But having sort of bashed Towering Inferno a little bit, and throughout this movie, there were some things that Towering Inferno did get right, and another movie that is notorious for some of these mistakes is Backdraft. And there are a few things that Backdraft did get right too. So I want to talk about those as well. So we'll start with Towering Inferno. There are two main things that they got right. And the first one is don't run through a room if it's fully on fire. So this is that room we had before. It's, still not much smoke. But what there is a lot of fire. They were trying to show a room that was fully on fire. So the fire had spread to basically everything in the room. This room wouldn't be survivable in real life, let alone with the smoke. There is just so much heat being generated that the fire is spreading from item to item, and if you run into that, it'll spread to you too. And that's exactly what happened in this scene. The guy tries to make a run for it through this room to get to the escape route on the other side. He doesn't make it. Obviously, this is a stunt person, and they were acting. In real life, of course, we wouldn't see anything because of all the smoke. But yes, don't think you can make a run through it, through a room that's got lots of things on fire, because you are not going to make it. Next thing I want to talk about is lifts. I'm not going to go to the slide just yet. It can be a little bit graphic. Once again, they're all actors. The still is taken from Towering Inferno, but it's why we don't use lifts if there's a fire. So I know a lot of people, the first thought that comes to mind is maybe you don't want to get trapped. Definitely you don't want to get trapped. Maybe you're worried about smoke coming up the lift shaft. That's another potential worry. But the real worry is that you will be inside the lift and the doors will open onto a room that's fully on fire. So that can happen fairly easily because the fire itself and the pressure from the fire can damage the call button or the wiring and trigger calling the lift to that floor. So the lift thinks there's somebody, or perhaps there was somebody there before the fire kept growing, that wanted to get on the lift. And so you're in the lift, the fire floor has called to lift, you open the lift doors open and it's just full of fire. And that's what they did in Towering Inferno as well. So these people were told by the fire chief, do not use that lift. They had another lift that was on the outside of the building that couldn't stop at those intermediate floors. And they were saying that that one was safe to use, but don't use the main lift in the building. These people ignored that. They got into the lift opened onto the floor where the fire was, and they all died. And unfortunately, that is a realistic scenario. That's why you will see firefighters using lifts. The firefighter's key lets them control where the lift goes. So you can't call the lift if it's in firefighting mode. It will only go where the firefighters inside the lift tell it to go. And obviously they've already scoped out where the fire is, and they make sure that they're going to a floor or two below the fire so that they're not in danger of this happening to them. So it's actually, the lifts do tend to work. Obviously specific firefighting lifts do tend to have extra resources, backup power, drainage to drain away water from the firefighting activities, those sorts of things. But the main reason that they use them is because they can use them safely, and we don't use them because we can't. Some very high-rise buildings do have evacuation lifts, and I know they're starting to put them more into high-rise buildings in places like London. And they will be very carefully designed so that this can't happen. So if it's a lift that's labelled as an evacuation lift, then the design of that building, that will have been thought about so that if you're in the lift to evacuate, it won't stop at intermediate floors. So you can't have the doors open onto fire. Right, so how are we going? That was Towering Inferno and a couple of things that Towering Inferno got right. The other one that I wanted to talk about a little bit was Backdraft. Obviously, that's another one of the well-known fire movies. In the movie Backdraft, you hear a lot of the firefighters saying, it's going to flash, it's going to flash, got to get out of here, it's going to flash. They're talking about a phenomenon called flashover, which is a real phenomenon, and they do need to get out of there before it happened. This is the same video of that recreation of the Stardust nightclub, but I'm going to show you a little bit further on in the video. So flashover, what happens is, so we start with a fire and it's producing lots of smoke. Smoke is actually flammable. So all of that black is soot that hasn't been burnt. So that's just pure carbon, the visible black stuff. Obviously, there's lots of toxic gases and things mixed in. But the black colour comes from that unburnt carbon, which can therefore still burn. And so what will happen is once the fire gets big enough, the smoke layer itself starts to burn. And then so we get a lot of heat up in this upper layer. That heat radiates down onto all of the stuff below. The chairs, the curtains, the cushions, the carpets, all of it, and starts heating that up. Eventually it will be hot enough that those things start to what we call pyrolyze. So that's what we saw before with the white vapors that get given off. So that's white because of the water vapor in the vapors. But mostly what is in those vapors are those volatile fuel molecules that are just ready to burn. When you have enough heat in that top layer, what happens is it's heating up that whole room. And at some point, the fire will go from being in one place to being throughout the room within a matter of seconds. And that's what we call flashover. And it's pretty deadly. And once it's happened, you can't survive it because that whole room is completely on fire. So I'm going to let this video run a little bit longer this time after the cameraman runs away and then sort of has a look back at what's going on. So we're starting to see those flames in the smoke. That's telling us that it's really hot up here. And you can see that we're getting pyrolysis coming all the way down. He runs just as the flashover happens because this is what is going on behind him. So it was a matter of seconds from seeing that fire in the smoke to this being what the room looks like. And you couldn't survive that. So that was one thing that they said a lot in Backdraft was it's going to flash, and they were looking for those flames in the smoke, and that's a really good sign that flashover is imminent and you need to get out of there really fast. So that was a good example of something they got right about fire. Of course, I couldn't talk about fire in the movies if I didn't talk about Backdraft itself. So this is a video, this was done by the Slow-Mo guys. It was done at a fire service training centre where they they're creating Backdraft so that the firefighters can see what it looks like, can see how it happens, and can try and avoid it. Because once again, this can be deadly. In the movies, the villain of the movie was creating Backdraft scenarios. That's not so realistic. So I'll talk through what happens with Backdraft, and then I'll explain where it often happens and why it wasn't quite like that in the actual movie. So if we go back to our basic fire science, we have our fire triangle. So to have fire, we need to have fuel, we need to have heat, and we need to have oxygen. So inside, in this case, a container, or inside a room, especially something like a basement, you have a fire. It's getting big quickly. So we've got lots of fuel that is being decomposed and producing those flammable fuel vapors. We have lots of heat, but in something like a basement or in this carefully designed shipping container, if you close all the doors and windows, or if it's well sealed because it's underground, you run out of oxygen. So now we have a scenario where we have lots of fuel and we have lots of heat, but we don't have oxygen. So it looks like the fire's gone out, the combustion has stopped happening. What happens when the firefighter comes and opens the basement door, let in a whole lot of oxygen? That fire combustion process starts again in a big way, and all of that oxygen will combust very, very quickly. So this can be deadly. So I've seen this done at the training centre here in Glasgow, where they recreate Backdraft like this so you can see it, and so that they can train the firefighters how to spot it so that they don't open that basement door and get a face full of fire. I'm going to start the video. So they show it first in real time. So you can see this. There we go. It just explodes out. So that's actual Backdraft, and that's what could happen. So they're going to show it to you in slow motion now as well, because you can see there's this big outrush as that combustion takes place and things expand and gases are produced, and it's so fast and it's so deadly. So here they've created it because they have a very special sealed container that they use. So they have all their sort of openings open for a while. let that fire get really big, close them, and then just let in, just that door was just opening when that backdraft happened. It happened so quickly. In the movie, the guy was sealing up rooms in houses. Houses are leaky. Some of the newer houses, maybe within the last 15 years, are better sealed. But certainly when this movie was made in 91, buildings just weren't that airtight. So even if you close up all the windows and things, you're not going to create a backdraft situation, especially if you've got lots of glazing. Glazing tends to fail well before you get the sort of levels of heat that you need to create a backdraft scenario. So when that flashover happens that we saw in the previous video, I'm going to go back to that one. This sort of flashover tends to break windows. So you don't then get a backdraft situation because you've got the oxygen through those openings. And as you can see, we've got lots of space here for the fire to come out, and that oxygen is coming in down low. This is open, this whole thing. So oxygen is flowing in at the bottom and fire and smoke are coming out at the top. So this sort of situation, which you'll get in most buildings, most occupied spaces where people could be, you're not going to get backdraft here because you're not going to limit the influx of oxygen. So it does tend to be basements where we really need to worry about that. I don't know if you have ever noticed walking along the sidewalk. I know what happens in Glasgow. Next to the building, you'll see these little glass bricks in the pavement. They're actually useful for the firefighters. They can break them to let out a lot of those hot gases and let in some oxygen and prevent backdraft like this from happening. So there are lots of, obviously, techniques that the firefighters use because this does not happen often, but when it does, it is dramatic. I think that was the last thing I wanted to talk about. So, yeah, this is nearly over. These videos, I think, are still all available. I don't know if the slides will get distributed, but they're all on YouTube. There are lots of good fire videos on YouTube. If you ever wonder how does that work on fire, look on YouTube. Do not try and do it yourself. Because as hopefully you've seen, fire can get big and it can get dangerous really quickly. So watch it on YouTube.
Thank you so much for that, Kristen. The questions are flying in on Slido, which is great. Folks, if you do have any more questions, throw them in, but maybe now's the time to start upvoting your favourite ones and we'll get to them. So we will be going for a break in just a moment. Before we run off though, I just want to say our event next month is about the Voynich manuscript, the world's most enigmatic book. And we're looking at that from a sceptical perspective. So that's Thursday, 26th of September, 7 p.m. UK time. Also, before the kickoff of the talk, I did mention QED. During the QED weekend, the Skeptic magazine will be giving out their Occam Awards, celebrating the best work within the skeptical community, and also the Rusty Razor for the most prominent promoter of unscientific ideas. If you want to get your nominations in for that, you can go to skeptic.org.uk/Occam. Look for the link in that in the text chat as well. Okay, so we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back at 7:55. So you've got 16 minutes to charge your glasses, empty your bladders and all that kind of stuff. In the meantime, please give some more love in the text chat there for Kristen, and we'll see you on the other side. Go out. Okay, we're back. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. And please give a warm welcome in text chat to our speaker again, Kristen Salzer-Frost. Kristen, welcome back.
Thanks.
All right, we're going to dive straight into the Q&A, and we're going to deviate from our normal question about do you have any pets, because we established a while ago that you do not. But there is a... Sorry about that, folks. But we've got a pet-related question to start off with. What... Kristen, if any, what pet animals would be good smoke detectors in your home? I have pet rats who notice neither the smoke alarm or a local earthquake.
I don't think any pet's actually going to be very helpful, unfortunately. Firstly, they're going to be affected by smoke just as much as we are. The carbon monoxide will make them sleepy and confused too. In terms of reacting to the fire alarms, once again, they probably won't. The other thing to note about that is children tend not to wake up to smoke alarms either. So if you've got children or even teenagers, evidence is that they won't wake up because with the fire alarm going off, even if it's nearby and loud, you're going to need to get them. So, yeah, unfortunately, your best bet is smoke detectors, not pets.
Okay. Maybe if you had, like, I don't know, like a goldfish or something, you could at least throw the water at the fire. Oh, I'm sure the fish wouldn't appreciate that too much. Okay. No fish were harmed in the production of this show, folks. Please don't worry about that. Okay, let's move on before I say anything offensive. Next question is from Dave J. In terms of home safety, what is the best advice you can give? Well, first up, don't have kids by the sounds of it, right? Which is generally a good piece of advice anyway. What else?
Smoke detectors. Smoke detectors are far and away the most important thing for saving lives in terms of house fires. Smoke won't wake you up. Smoke makes you sleepy. So the only way to have a chance of getting out while you still can is to have smoke detectors. Other things like a fire blanket in the kitchen can be useful, but smoke detectors and making sure you know where your evacuation routes are is really, really important because, as I say, the smoke will quite quickly make you confused. So if it's something that you've practiced, you're much more likely to successfully escape.
Okay.
And leave it to the fire service. Unless you're really confident, don't fight it yourself. Call the fire service. And the sooner you call them, the better, because the fire grows so quickly. So
you heard it here, folks. Don't attack a fire with your goldfish bowl either. Okay. And I think there's legislation certainly in Scotland now that your smoke detectors have to be sort of interconnected and stuff. So if one goes off, they all go off. Like, is that seemed to domestic Brian, that was an annoyance to sort of put together and an expense. But I guess I'll be thankful for it if anything goes wrong. Do we have any solid evidence? It's been around for about a year or so. Like, do you happen to know if it's been, should we say, more effective? Are we seeing less deaths?
We haven't had any statistics published yet that cover that time period. But I do think it was a good idea because if you've left your phone charging on the couch and that's caused a fire and you're asleep in the bedroom, if the detectors aren't interlinked, you might not be woken up by that detector until the fire has spread so far that the one in your bedroom goes off.
Got you.
So having them interlinked does give you extra time at those crucial early stages. So I do think we will see some statistics that show that those interlinked detectors do help.
Okay, got you. And a nice segue on to the next question then. How useful are those little fire extinguishers? I guess the ones we see in offices, or maybe some have them in their homes. Yeah. It seems like even a relatively small fire is more than it can handle. So could you compare it to goldfish bowl of water? Presumably better than that, but how useful is it? As you just said, like, contact a fire service.
It mostly comes down to your training. If you have been trained to use fire extinguishers and you've practiced putting fires out with them, which is lots of fun, then they are useful. But if you don't know what you're doing with them, if you've never used one before, I wouldn't bother.
Come on.
I know.
Pointy, scooshy, right?
So I don't know if you remember, I had some images of people in a shop watching the fire burn.
Yeah.
Someone later on did get the fire extinguisher, and all they managed to do was blow the flames onto more stuff.
Okay.
So that's the worry, is that if you're not sure about what you're doing, it could actually make things worse.
Right.
And if you're not confident, as I say, seconds matter. So you're better off leaving. If you have been trained and you do feel confident to use it, and it's still quite a small fire contained to one thing, if it started spreading to multiple items, don't bother, get out of there. But if it's just still contained to one place, one item, it's worth a go. But if you haven't put it out by the time your first extinguisher is empty, do not go and get a second one. That's your cue
Okay.
that this fire is too big and you need to leave.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about like how often that's been shown in like TV programs and movies and stuff. Usually they're quite effective, you know, unless it's in it. And so
It's amazing how they turn off the gas just as they're using the extinguisher.
yeah, awesome. Okay, well that's disappointing, but all right, I'll take your word for it, I guess.
I would use one. I've been trained to use them, but if you don't have one or you haven't been trained, just get out of there.
I used to do health and safety demos for new hires at my work, so I've held the fire extinguisher many times, but never had a go. What a waste. Okay, we better move on before I start crying. Next question is from Serdar. Hello, Serdar. Most of the fire precautions at British homes are to provide a safe escape from the fire. How can we educate ourselves about risky situations to prevent fire?
So, yes, you're right. Most of the fire precautions in our legislation is about safe escape because our legislation tends to be reactive. Something goes wrong, we change the law to try and make sure it doesn't go wrong in that way again.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of preventing fire, it comes back to your fire science, your fire triangle. So, obviously, we've got oxygen. If there's enough oxygen for us to breathe, there's enough oxygen for a fire. We've got fuel. There is flammable stuff everywhere in our built environment these days, more so than ever. So what it comes back to is then sources of heat to ignite that fire. It's the ignition sources that are the focus for preventing fires. So making sure your electrics are up to date, making sure you're not leaving candles unattended. Even things like if you're using a candle, and I've seen this happen, or at least I've seen photos from the firefighters of this happening. Someone's been having a bath and they've left their candle on there. A lot of bathtubs are plastic these days. They will burn. By the time it burns down to the water, it's spread to everything else. So the bathtub full of water is not helping. So yeah, it's just being really, really careful with those heat sources. Charging batteries obviously is a big problem and getting more of a problem. Cooking, smoking less so these days, thankfully. But yeah, that's for fire prevention. It's the ignition sources that are the big focus because we can't remove the fuel, we can't remove the oxygen. So
okay, what about electric blankets?
Yeah, it's that electrical. Most of them will cut off most of the time, but if you get some sort of electrical short, that can cause a fire. So yes, try not to leave anything electrical on unattended.
Yeah. I've had
easier said than done.
I've had electric blanket fire before. It was my middle-aged bladder woke me up in the middle of the night, and I went, "Oh, I better put that out." So, congratulations. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Next question is from the omnipresent Igor. Now that smoking is no longer cool and becomes less popular, do we have the data? Have the number of house fires decreased?
So it's hard to attribute it to that one cause, but house fires have been decreasing over the last 20 years and have come down quite a lot, from like 1,000 a year to about 300 a year in the UK. So that's a
that's smaller number.
Decrease.
That's small. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it's really come down. That could be the ones that involve injuries or fatalities. The other thing is those fire statistics are collected by the fire services. So if you don't call them, they don't record them.
Was about to be my next follow-on question. I wonder how many small fires start and are put out by the house owners that never get reported.
Quite a lot, but we have no way of finding that
out.
No
way of knowing. Yeah.
But yes, definitely the reduction in smoking will certainly have been part of that reduction. Better modern electrical appliances and wiring will be part of it as well. People getting drunk and deep frying stuff hasn't changed. That's a cause of fires.
Come on, get an air fryer, folks. Get an air fryer, for goodness sake. Right? They're fantastic. Couldn't go back now. Okay. Let's move on to our next question, which comes from David Frank. Hello, David. Previous SIPO speaker and Glasgow Skeptics speaker, David Frank. G'day. Are Australians better at handling fire situations than other nationalities? As a West Aussie, I swear we got some bushfire survival training in school.
Yeah, I grew up in Wagga. I think I did too.
Okay.
Yes, I grew up in a town called Wagga Wagga.
Do you have well-trained kangaroos to help you or anything like that?
No.
No. Okay.
What I do think is that we do get exposed to the dangers of fire perhaps a bit more because we get such terrible bushfires in Australia, much more than we do get wildfires in the UK, but they're just not anything like the bushfires in Australia. So I suspect there's a little bit of that we, as I was talking about before, because most of the fire that we're exposed to, the cooking, the bonfires, the movies, it's all well controlled. And you can forget how dangerous fire can be and how quickly it can get dangerous. That exposure to those bushfires, I think, does help reinforce a bit that it is dangerous. So I think that might be part of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if there's a generational thing going on as well. When I were a lad back in the many decades ago, it was quite normal for us to go build our own fires, particularly around fireworks night. Nowadays, I don't think kids would be allowed to do that. So they're kind of not around, certainly in the UK anyway, maybe not around. They don't get to play with matches as much as we did when we were young. So maybe on the flip side of that, there is, it's more of a surprise to them. I don't know. I'm speculating here.
I think that would be a good topic to research for someone, not me.
For sure. Get on it, folks. All right. Somebody wants to fund that one. Okay. Another question from Igor. Did the science of firefighting reliably advance beyond the apply some water to the burning stuff? In other words, have we got anything fancy and new? Igor suggests magical air displacement bombs, mighty fire blankets, something like that.
Yeah. So most firefighting is still get everything wet, because that takes a lot. When stuff is wet, you'll probably know from building those fires as a kid, if it's wet, it takes a lot to get it going. The water absorbs a huge amount of energy, and that's essentially how that works, is we get all the fuel wet and then it just doesn't have the heat to keep burning. We do have one of the things that's becoming a bit more prevalent is water mist system. So it's still water, but rather than using it to soak everything, the water mist droplets are tiny. It's like fog. It's like walking through fog.
Oh, nice.
And those tiny, tiny, tiny droplets have a huge surface area. So they can absorb huge amounts of heat. So the primary mechanism for them is they get drawn into the fire on the air currents, and they just absorb all the heat and turn into steam. And then the secondary effect is that steam then pushes the oxygen away. So rather than removing the fuel from the equation, we're removing the heat and the oxygen from the equation. So it's still water, but it's being used in a different way.
And is that like regular fire hoses that are doing that, or is it?
No, so the technology originally came from ships.
Okay.
You don't want to fill the ship with water to try and put the fire up.
I understand that's frowned upon in maritime circles. Yeah.
And then they've become quite popular in things like hotels, where you still have that nice confined space to hold all the mist where you want it to be. But they'll come through nozzles. They look a little bit like sprinkler heads, but they tend not to have the frangible bulb. They tend to be activated by the smoke detector, but just in that small room. So they don't work really well in your big rooms like your open plan offices. But for compartmentized buildings like universities with all the small offices, or hotels, or even some residential places, I've seen them used.
Okay.
So that's a different mechanism. It's still water, but it is a different mechanism. But all of the firefighting comes down to breaking that fire triangle. We either have to get rid of the heat, get rid of the oxygen, or get rid of the fuel. So.
Okay. Next question from Cat H. A friend suffered a small house fire and had more damage from the water used to put it out than from the fire. The damp caused extensive mould. Is this common? Well, if they'd had a misty, that would have been better, right? And lovely in a hot summer day as well, by the way.
Yeah, the fire service use so much water. They have to be really, really sure that fire is out. So they use a lot of water. Unfortunately, it is common for you to end up with more damage from the water than the water and the smoke tend to be the things that cause the most damage rather than the things that were actually burning. Unless you get to that flashover situation, in which case
I mean, I can understand if you're a homeowner and you're looking and thinking, okay, guys, the fire's out now, and they're still like pumping away there. That's gonna be a little bit inconvenient for them, right? But better than your house burnt.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is there's actually lots of fuels in the home that can what we call smolder, where the fire is sort of inside. So things like mattresses that have their foam, they've essentially got air bubbles through them.
Yeah.
So they've got their oxygen, so they can be burning deep inside something. You can't see it.
Can't see it.
And eventually it burns its way through to the surface and then the fire starts again. So they do have to sort of really wet things through. Couches, mattresses, carpets, all of these have to be completely soaked to make sure they're not smouldering.
Okay. Sorry, homeowners.
Yeah.
Right, let's, on that disappointing note, let's move on to the next question from Haley. In the aftermath of Grenfell, lots changed in the utilities industry around due diligence. Were there significant changes also seen to engineering practice?
Yes and no. If everybody had been doing everything they were supposed to do in the first place, it wouldn't have happened. All the checks and balances were supposed to be in place and everybody has been assuming somebody else has been doing it. So I think since Grenfell, I think there's been a bit more focus on making sure everybody does the bits they're supposed to do and not just assume someone else is going to do it. And that's what a lot of the new legislation and building regulations have been aimed at, is just making sure that people are taking responsibility that they were supposed to be taking anyway.
Yeah, it's so disappointing that, well, many things about that, but the fact that a lot of it was, should we say, administrative and presumably it seemed like some cost cutting going on as well, which, never bodes well. Okay. Let's see. Question from Anonymous. In the average office block, how good do you think the fire safety system is? Any particularly good or bad examples?
So in general, I would say office blocks are usually pretty good. The rules around them haven't changed much in at least 40 years. They tend to be made out of concrete. They tend to have their evacuation stairs. They tend to have your detection systems and alarms and things. I can't think of any standout examples, actually, because we've sort of figured them out and have been pretty consistent with them for a while now. So,
I mean, is it reason? I mean, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, like, like in terms of the fires that we see, like spoken about, a lot of times it's like maybe warehouses and obviously like a lot of domestic, and you don't tend to see it too much in office blocks, right?
Yeah. So because offices have had to have smoke detectors for decades, we tend to find out about them early. The fire service, they'll have monitoring, often third-party monitoring that then goes to the fire service so that they can come and deal with it fairly quickly. Offices are we have a pretty good understanding of what's going on there, so we can sort of mitigate the risk a bit more, whereas something like a warehouse, they don't have, because there's not people there, the rules are a lot less strict, so you don't necessarily need to have detection, because the purpose of the detection is to evacuate the people who are there. But if there's nobody there, or we're not expecting people to be asleep or distracted or things like that. So the loss of life tends to come when people are asleep.
Yeah.
And then the big fires tend to be unoccupied buildings, often during construction. So you'll have seen images on the news, massive tall buildings completely on fire. They're almost always during the construction phase.
Oh, okay.
Because all of the safety systems aren't in place yet. So like the second Glasgow School of Art fire, the sprinkler system hadn't been finished yet. So they were sort of half built, so it wasn't there to put the fire out.
Second heartbreak. Hard times, didn't like that at all. This is maybe a bit of a segue. It's another anonymous question. Have design changes and modernised approaches to fire safety improved survival/escape chances? If so, by how much?
So yes, definitely. So as I said, the number of fires has been going down every year for a long time now. And yes, I think the number of fatalities goes down as well. The big thing has been the prevalence of smoke detection that we have now. Because that's really the key to get people out early. And we've known that for a long time now. So that's why more and more places are needing smoke detectors. That's why they brought in that legislation in Scotland to have the interlinked detectors. Because that's the primary tool that we have for getting people out early before they're injured or killed.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it does evoke images. Like you hear plenty of stories of sort of early 1900s Dickensian style, sweatshops, and like having all the exits are blocked off to stop people slacking, and you in general you don't get that.
Yeah, that's what happened in that Stardust fire, was that they locked some of the exits at the back because they didn't want people sneaking in. But then when the fire occurred, people couldn't get out.
Yeah. It's horrific.
We have better technology in that we have fire doors that I think we're better at doing fire doors that lock so you can't get in, but you can get out.
You can get out, yeah.
So that's less of a problem these days. So yeah, there have been definitely incremental steps. Every time we discover a problem, we do try and fix it.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. I had to carry a disabled colleague downstairs in their wheelchair in fire drills, avoiding lifts. Thanks for explaining why. But what accessibility issues apply?
Yeah, accessibility is an area where I don't think the fire regulations in the UK deal with things very well. The main method of dealing with people with mobility issues is that the stairs generally should be provided with refuge spaces so that the people can wait there for someone to come and help them.
Okay.
That's not ideal. We are getting better about putting things like evacuation lifts in, but of course they're expensive and they have to be tailored to the building to make sure you don't end up with a face full of fire. So we're getting there. It's not an easy problem to fix, and I think it's an area that needs a lot more work and needs to be a big focus of the industry going forward. And there's actually very little in place at all for other types of disabilities.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine in terms of feasibility and budget, it's got to be a building of a certain size before you would even consider an evacuation lift, right? So in many circumstances, it's just not going to happen. Okay. Let's move on. Does knowing about fire safety make you worry more when you see things that aren't right in buildings? You must do that. You could like walk around and have like a little look around, right?
Yeah. I was with a group of people. We'd all gone up to Aberdeen to give a talk to people about fire safety. And we got out of the train station and into the shopping centre and we all went, "Ooh, there are the sprinklers. That looks like a smoke control system." And then we always just done that. I don't think it makes me worry more. I think a lot of places are pretty good these days. And I know I look for knowing where my exits are, because if I need to get out of there fast, I want to already know. And looking for the fact that, do they have the little signs up to tell you what to do in a fire? I do read those. I think I'm probably the only one, but I actually
probably,
because, the big thing is knowing how to get out. That's the thing I worry about. The fire service can deal with putting out the fire. I just need to get out of there.
All right. Can you spot like a sexy new sprinkler? Like, do you ever look up and go, "Oh, so they've got the X24s then? Nice." Can you do that?
Yeah. You can actually tell different types of sprinkler heads. They look a bit different. And you can get quick response sprinkler heads that are slimmer and there's less metal in them, so they take less time to heat up. Ooh. So you can look up, they've got the quick response ones. So, they haven't upgraded their system yet. Yeah.
Okay, right. So if you go into like a 5-star hotel, and I'm sure you do that a lot, right? You make sure if they've got old sprinklers, that you have a word with the concierge, okay?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, awesome. Do you, it's Igor again, sorry. Hello, Igor. Do you become more terrified of fires after working for so long with them, or did you become desensitized to the horrors of fire demons? What a horrible description.
Yeah. I fluctuate a bit. There are times when I'd be sort of a bit desensitized, and I read a lot of accounts from survivors looking at sort of what they did, what went wrong, those sorts of things. Obviously, there are the people who didn't make it out, and I've read, the forensic reports and the fire investigations and things. And so sometimes I feel a bit desensitized, and then sometimes it will just hit me all at once, and I need to step away for a while. sort of listening to the survivor testimonies from Grenfell was heart-wrenching.
Yeah, hard going. There's a document, I think it's a Netflix documentary about a fire on a ghost ride in a park in Sydney in the early 80s.
In Luna Park, yeah.
That's the one, yeah. Oh, yeah. If you fancy a good cry, folks, watch that one. But otherwise, stay away. It's horrible. Okay. For another anonymous question here. What is the most realistic depiction of fire that you have seen in film, TV? Who gets it right? Okay, you mentioned I think they got it right in some places, right?
Yeah,
but anyone that really nails
it. The problem is that they never, ever, ever have enough smoke, because otherwise you just have a black screen and it would be really boring. So yeah, unfortunately, and also they need to keep the actors safe, so they can't have the fire spreading rapidly and trapping the actors. So those sort of technical constraints mean I don't think you ever really will get a particularly realistic view. Yeah, the only time it will look realistic really is on the news, when you sort of see the images from a distance of a big fire.
Yeah,
that's realistic. But the ones where you see the people, they can't put those people in that sort of danger. So they have to have no smoke, and they have to have, control. They usually control it with they'll often have gas supply that they can just shut off and things like that, just to make sure that the fire and the actors don't actually touch.
Okay. The next question is about electric battery fires. So they get a lot of attention, whereas all the car fires with petrol and diesel rarely get reported. Are movies going to get these right? Oh, so we did have Robert Llewellyn off of Red Dwarf fame speak for us a while ago. He's a bit of an electric vehicle evangelist, and I think there is a lot of fuss made about occasionally when those batteries do go on fire. Do you know much about that?
A little. So the big problem when an electric battery catches fire is that it's really, really hard to put it out.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a phone or a laptop, you throw it out the window and you let it burn on the grass. If it's a car, you can't really do that, which is why the cars are a bit of a focus. Because the usual methods of dumping water on it usually aren't enough to put it out. And unfortunately, if you do manage to stop the flames, you can still be having the chemical reactions going on, creating flammable gases which can then explode.
Okay. Ooh.
So as far as I know, the main tactic that we still have is get everything else away from it and just let it burn.
Just let it burn, okay.
Which is easier said than done in some situations. I suspect that the movies will get them about as right as any other fire.
Yeah.
They can be very dramatic, so that would be good. Right. But that everybody steps back and watches it burn isn't great.
Well, let's have another movie fire trope, okay, Kristen. So if I've got my gun and there's a car on its side, if I shoot the petrol tank of the car, is it going to go and blow up?
It will if you pack the trunk with explosives.
Right.
But actually, it's really fairly hard to get a petrol explosion.
Boo.
Because the mix of petrol and air that you need to have that combust is a really narrow gap. You have to have just the right amount of both of them. So it's easy to do in an engine because we've built it to have just the right mix. That's what our fuel injectors and things are for. Mm-hmm. But in terms of making it explode, you're not going to make a petrol engine explode.
Disappointing.
I know.
All right. Let's get practical next. This next question is from Nadia. Are particular fabrics, for example, polyester, used in clothing or furniture to be avoided in terms of fire safety? Now, there's regulations around furniture, right? But
there
presumably not around clothes, right?
Yeah. So there are two. So there are sort of two main types of materials: fire retardant and non-fire retardant. Fire retardant has extra chemicals added that break up that chain reaction of producing those flammable vapors. So it won't decompose in a way that creates those flammable vapors, so it won't burn. Those additives aren't great for us, though, so we tend not to put them in our clothes.
Okay.
When it comes to clothes, there are sort of two branches of materials that I think of. I think of what we call thermoplastic materials, which is materials that melt when they get hot before they burn. And we have thermoset materials, which is materials that will burn and char before they melt. So things like polyester will melt. So that's why you sometimes see that on kids' clothes, because it won't flame, it'll just melt away.
Mm-hmm.
And then things like wool, cotton, natural fibers tend to char. So on their own, neither of them burn actually all that much. But unfortunately, what we do a lot is use blended materials like polycotton.
Mm-hmm.
And what you get is the polyester will melt and the cotton won't. And so the cotton holds the polyester in place and then it can burn. So the blended materials tend to be the worst in terms of fire. So yeah, something like this, which is wool, is not going to burn particularly well. But the polycotton Halloween costume is going to go up pretty
quickly. Do you think that's why in Leviticus they don't like you wearing mixed fabrics?
They didn't have polyester back then.
Yeah, well, that just goes to show you how prescient the Bible was. Okay, everybody, you heard it here first. Okay, let's move on before we start converting anybody. This is another anonymous question. What is the best practice for data centers? Historically, halon was used, and there are also dry sprinkler systems available. What are the pros and cons?
Yeah, so the problem with the halons is that they're super bad for the ozone layer. So they have been phased out. So all those chlorofluorocarbons are really good at putting out fires. They do it in two ways. The main mechanism is by replacing the oxygen. No oxygen, can't burn. But they also thermally decompose. So when they get hot, they will absorb some of that heat into a chemical reaction. So they were really good, but not so good that we want to keep using them because, as I say, super bad for the ozone layer. So these days we tend to use more inert gases. There are some chemical-based ones still available that do still get used, but actually I think these days a lot of people have switched over to the sort of inert gases, so made up of carbon dioxide, not carbon monoxide.
Okay.
And nitrogen, argon, those sorts of things that just are inert, nothing's going to happen. And all they do is you pump them into the room and it pushes all of the air out, no oxygen, no fire.
Okay.
So you can
what happens to the little data center nerds that are in there plugging things in? They're expendable, right?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
So we can only use them in places where there's very few people and where the people are well trained. So actually data centers are quite good for that because they'll be made aware of the alarm going off and they will know that when that alarm goes off, they have maybe 30 seconds to get out of there.
Hey, okay.
And there are other safety features. So for a bigger data center where the evacuation times may be cutting it a bit fine, just to run across the room, you could have buttons where the first person to get there stops and leans on the button. That holds the system off from activating. Once everybody's out, they let go of the button on their way out and then it activates. Okay. So there's things like that.
Unless like it's Dave that nobody likes and was getting bye Dave. Sucks to be you. Yep. Okay.
Yes, because of course the percentage of oxygen required for the fire to burn is very much the percentage of oxygen required for humans to respirate. To be alive. So.
Okay. How annoying is that? What a coincidence. Okay. So anybody working in a data center, I don't know, get a scuba diving kit just in case.
So, when the alarm goes off, you run.
Yeah, exactly.
And run.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, we're back to Igor again. I noticed that both culturally and infrastructurally, thanks for using the word infrastructurally in your question, Igor. People in the UK are way more diligent about fire safety than most of the countries, most other countries maybe. Does it yield results? Do you look at fire reports per 100,000 population and compare it across countries, something like that?
Yeah. There have definitely been studies looking cross-culturally at how different cultures react to fire, and I think. Yeah, you're right. The UK does do very well. We're quite conscious of it. Our legislation and guidance, our British standards are quite good about things like testing our alarms. And the point of testing the alarm isn't just to make sure it works, because it's not going to fail every week. It's to familiarise the people in the building with what the alarm sounds like. Mm-hmm. So they know that alarm is not the microwave's finished, it's you need to evacuate. So, yes, we are quite good in the UK. We're quite good with these days with the escape doors, the fire doors that can't be locked or don't need to be excessively locked. Mm-hmm. We have learnt this the hard way. As I say, we've had our fair share of disasters, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think in general, world over, fire safety culture has improved a lot in the last, say, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think partly that's because we're better connected and people get to see the information. So it used to be if you had a fire or a disaster in your town, you'd hear about it.
Yeah.
But I probably wouldn't have heard about it in Wagga. So whereas these days we do all hear about them. So I think we've got a better awareness, which certainly helps.
Okay. All right. And hey, well done, the UK, I guess. It's not often we get to say that. So let's enjoy it while we can. Right. Next question. Unsurprisingly from Anonymous. Does jet fuel melt steel beams? So this is a 9/11 reference. Kristen, your thoughts?
So no, but it doesn't need to. So the thing about steel is when we're using it to hold stuff up, it doesn't need to just be solid. So obviously when it melts, it turns into a liquid. But it doesn't go like that. So it's solid, and then as it heats up, it loses some of that strength well before it turns into a liquid. It actually loses about 50% of its strength by about 500 degrees Celsius. Okay. A typical built environment fire with the sort of stuff we have in offices, homes, etc., is sort of 800 to 900 degrees Celsius by the time flashover happens. So actually all the fuel needed to do was set enough stuff on fire that the heat built up and the steel lost strength. It didn't have to melt the steel.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, we did. The first time I got to meet Kristen was when Glasgow Skeptics ran an event about that. Very well attended, as I remember. I think we did have a few truthers in the audience, and they were, I guess, fascinated by the science that we brought to them. But it continues to be a contentious subject. And with that in mind, let's move on. Do you enjoy movies that get fire right more than movies that get it wrong? Or do you know what? Can you just suspend your disbelief and just go like, that was a cool movie? How much does it ruin it for you?
I'm terrible at suspending my disbelief. What I do think is my husband enjoys movies where they get it wrong because he gets to watch me rant about it and he thinks that's hilarious.
Okay. And talking of movies and talking of contentious subjects, we're coming to the last question. It's the most difficult question. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Definitely. Absolutely. Watch it at Christmas.
Okay. Well, look, I mean, we can't possibly argue with a fire engineer on this one, folks. So I think we finally got.
I can't have the Christmas tree. It's a Christmas movie.
Yeah, exactly. I'm inclined to agree, although I am less invested in the argument than many other people are. But it's a banger of a movie anyway, like no matter what. So get it down. Hey, Die Hard is like a puppy. You know, it's not just for Christmas, but hey, you know, enjoy it more at Christmas, right? Okay.
Full time.
For sure, exactly right. Okay, and I think on that wonderful, wonderful note, we're going to end our session for the evening. Kristen, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay, and audience members, the night's not over. If you do want to come and join us in our virtual pub, the Lock-In's Razor, we're going to be spinning that up our little Zoom room in not too many minutes' time, so you can join us for a chinwag and a pint and a virtual discussion should you desire. Otherwise, our next talk, as I mentioned before, is next month. It is the 26th of September, and we are going to be unlocking the secrets of the Voynich manuscript. It's going to be a belter. So thank you once again, everybody. Again, please give your love in the text chat for Kristen, and we'll see you next time. Eggman out.